So this video here specifically is going to be about the peaceful protesters in America, the ones who are protesting against systemic racism and systemic police abuse. And I guess for what it's worth, my thoughts on how they should deal with it and how they should actually deal with it. If we look here, and this is more of a left wing critique, you could argue, of certain U.S. politicians, but at the same time, it's a point that MLK made, which I'll get to in a few minutes. But it's the fact that a lot of these senators who are in charge, they're not your friend. They ain't gonna change the system. They ain't gonna make it better for minorities and poor working class people. And if you want evidence, then watch and listen carefully. This is about Amy Klobuchar when she was working as a prosecutor within Minnesota. Basically, about how she failed to prosecute police officers who were involved in basically not murders. It's hard to quantify what the actual were, incidents in which people died within police custody when arrests were happening. And so Christopher Burns, a 44-year-old black man, was unarmed and at home in Minneapolis with his fiancée with 3 young children when the police arrived in response to a domestic violence call. The officers put him in a chokehold and he died on the scene, according to the medical examiner. So why chokeholds were legal, I have no idea, considering how dangerous they are, because you can be out extremely quickly depending on how tight the hold is. So the 2002 incident marked the 3rd killing of a black person by the city's police department that year, prompting local activists to stage rallies and demand that the 2 officers involved in Burns' death face charges. The focus of the community's anger was Amy Klobuchar, the up-and-coming attorney of Hennepin County, who had declined to prosecute police accused of using excessive force against black suspects. And so Klobuchar, then 42, declined to bring charges against officers, and a grand jury convened did not indict them. Nearly 2 decades later, Klobuchar is this is written in 2019, but there were dozens. See here, as prosecutor for Minnesota's most populous county from 1999 to 2007, Klobuchar declined to bring charges in more than 24 cases in which people were killed in encounters with police. And so some of these people might not have been black people, they might have been white people or Hispanic people or whatever. But what we can see is that Klobuchar refused 24 cases. It might be the case that these cases were extremely difficult to prove or whatever, but what we know is that she declined them. At the same time, she aggressively prosecuted small offences such as vandalism and routinely sought longer than recommended sentences, including for minors, such prosecutions done with the aim of curbing more serious crime have had mixed results and have been criticised with their disproportionate effect on poor and minority communities. So we can see that Klobuchar failed in her job essentially to rein in police using a very insanely aggressive tactics. And here we have and Klobuchar coincidentally could have levied charges against Derek Chauvin, the man who killed George Floyd. And so back then, while she was in charge, he actually killed I think it was 2 people. He was involved in 2 deaths, and she could have prosecuted him, but she chose not to. The Floyd case has put a national spotlight. This is someone called Jesse Van Berkel writing about Klobuchar's time as a prosecutor. The Floyd case put the national spotlight back on Klobuchar's days as a prosecutor, particularly as it became clear Derek Chauvin, the officer involved in Floyd's death, was involved in the death of another citizen whilst Klobuchar was prosecutor. Chauvin was one of the 6 officers fired on and killed Wayne Reyes in 2006 after Reyes reportedly aimed a shotgun at police after stabbing his friend and girlfriend. The death happened during Klobuchar's tenure at the helm of Hennepin County. In this case, it looks fairly reasonable, but Klobuchar did not criminally charge police involved in more than 24 fatalities that occurred during her time as prosecutor. She left those decisions to a grand jury, a practice that was common at the time. So she didn't go for prosecution, it was left to the public to decide, essentially, by the looks of things. Klobuchar pushed back on this idea, the idea that I somehow declined a case which has been reported on some news blogs and then set on the internet again is absolutely false. It is a lie. I don't know what else to say. I never declined the case. It was handled by my successor, and blah blah blah. The damage has been done. So we can see that Klobuchar potentially is a symptom of a system which does not prosecute overly aggressive police. I mean, in this case here, they used a chokehold on someone in his own home over an alleged domestic abuse call. So they didn't even establish facts of did this man actually commit domestic abuse. It looks like they ran up on his house, broke in and restrained him, put him in a chokehold, and he died. Who does that remind you of, apart from the house bit? And so Klobuchar clearly had a chance to change things. And as senator, she hasn't done a lot. And so that leads me to another point that I wanted to make here about, Nancy Pelosi. What has she done? Very little. Very, very little. And when it came to Trump going for his Bible up, in which he used tear gas on multiple people, he what did she do? She didn't say, he's using the book for a photo op. She did the same thing where she grabbed her Bible and started reading from it. Well done, you got him. And so it brings us on to our next point about a certain presidential candidate, Mr. Joe Biden, who wrote the controversial 1994 crime bill. And so it's an incredibly tough on crime bill, which dealt with minorities very, very harshly. And so what we can see here is that we've got three people who have essentially played a large part in doing very little to resolve things in terms of dealing with police brutality. And so if we look here, if Barack Obama wanted to do anything, he actually had a supermajority in 2008, and he wanted to do any kind of reform to the police, he could have done so. He could have done so here. He didn't. And so that brings us on to another point about where MLK said, "I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. The Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goals you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action.'" And so the point of this video is that if you want systemic change, you have to push for it to happen. And so I could be incredibly salty here, which I am, that the black community overall chose Joe Biden, a man who wrote the crime bill, over someone like Bernie Sanders, who's been fighting for the rights of various minorities and orientations for his life. He's made mistakes, sure, absolutely, but he's a far better person than Joe Biden, and he would have made police reform. He could have potentially, had he been asked, I'm sure he would have done police reforms. But my point being is that in order to change things, you have to make systemic changes. And so that's why people like Pelosi have to be voted out. And if you're a person who's like, oh, this is an incredibly lefty video, fine. You can even get people in, right-wingers like Rand Paul, incredibly right-wing libertarian, to get in there and say, look, this police brutality has gone too far. People have the right to protest peacefully. This is what this video is about specifically, people protesting peacefully. Not about looters or rioters. I'll do them there in a separate video, and there's a reason specifically why I've done that, is not to conflate them. And so what we can see from this is Rand Paul has been pushing for police officers to not get weapons because of the how militarized the police are and how quick to violence and use these weapons. The police are. And point being is that, look, wherever you sit in politics, if you want something systemic to change, then you have to choose people who actually need to change things. We know Pelosi, Klobuchar, Biden, they ain't going to change things, not radically. And so either you go the libertarian route, if that's what you're inclined to do, and you get involved in primaries and selection processes for senators, for mayors, attorneys, everything like that. For county attorneys, they're elected, I believe. Any position that is elected, you should get involved in if you want to see systemic change. And so that's how you change things. You can't constantly sit on the outside and hope things will change. It's not how it happens. You're not going to get a Yama Yugi, Jaden Yugi, luck miracle draw. It's not going to happen. You have to get involved. That's one thing I've learned over the last few years, is if you want to change things, you have to get involved in the selection process. Because if you do not get involved in the selection process, no one cares. No one cares. Because now Joe Biden, he will have to say something now about police violence, and what his best thought is that maybe we should train police officers to shoot people in the leg instead of in the heart or in the head. That's great, Joe. You're not going to change a lot doing that. You can bleed out very easily and die, especially if you get hit in an artery. So what you have to do is go for systemic change, and you have to make demands of these people. Even if you can't get someone like Klobuchar out, you have to make demands. And Look, Sun Tzu said, when you surround an army, leave a free outlet. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. Now, a lot of these people are going to be desperate. A lot of these senators are desperate because they want these protests, these riots to stop, because they want the economy to tick back up. And so what you have to do is you have to make demands of them now. You have to say to people like Pelosi, Klobuchar, look, when it comes to November, yeah, we're going to back your boy. We're going to back your boy Biden. But when it comes to the House seats, when it comes to Senate seats, we're going to back you because you're giving us nothing. You're giving us nothing. And what's the point? What's the point of coming to bat for you constantly? This is a point Charlemagne made to Biden, and Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. And then he had to walk back the statements because obviously he's saying he's trying to be clever. But Charlemagne's point is, what are you going to give to the black community? And that's something you need to ask these people. What are they going to give to poor minorities, poor minority communities? What are these senators going to give you? Because if they ain't going to give you anything, you don't owe them. You don't owe them a vote. And you can say, the Republicans are far worse. Fine. You can primary these people. That's what AOC did when she took the seat from Joe Crowley, an odious idiot, and she took the seat from him. And you have a much more progressive person within the House, and that's what you have to do. You have to make demands of these people now, whilst they're scared, whilst they don't know what they don't know when this is going to end. You can say, look, we want the protest to end, and how do we go about that? You have to give them the option. You have to give them an out, essentially. And shouts out to all the people, protecting businesses and things like that. The protesters saying that, look, we're not rioters. We don't want this to be a riot, or we don't want this to be about looting. We want this to be peaceful. We want this to be about George Floyd and his murder. We don't want this to be for opportunists and other people to smash up small businesses and things like that, because you ain't going to get a lot of support from people like that. Shouts out to this lady as well. Probably one of the bravest people I've ever seen, because she could have got absolutely lit up here. By these guys. She could have got beaten up very badly. Same with these guys here. They could have been beaten very badly. So to wrap up this video, my key points are: if you want systemic change, get involved in the system. Within Minnesota, you're lucky, that Keith Ellison is on the case, and I'm hoping he does a very good job. He's a guy who I think cares about these issues. But if you had someone like Klobuchar, what would she have done in this situation? If you had a Republican, what would they have done in this situation? I don't know, but they probably wouldn't have bumped up the charge to Derek Chauvin to second-degree murder. They might have tried to do first-degree murder, and then the guy gets off on it because they don't have enough evidence to do it. But they may not have charged the other officers involved, which is something that Keith Ellison has done. And so, in order for you to get systemic change, you have to get into the system, and to get into the system, it means you have to primary people during the selection process. The best way to do it is get involved in the selection process. I know one of my friends, he wants to get involved in the my local seat as well, and to run as a candidate, and I respect him absolutely for that, because that's the only way to get things to change. If you're not going to run yourself and be the selective candidate, if you don't feel like you're up for it, or you don't feel like you win, fine. But when the selection process comes, either you get concessions from them and say, look, I'm only going to support you as a candidate if you promise you're going to reform the police, you're going to push for it, you're going to push bills, even if you're not going to win, at least try. That's the bare minimum we ask you. Even if you don't have a majority in the House or the Senate, try and push a bill, try and do something for us, because at the moment they're not doing a lot. Pelosi, she's done very little to help people. She's gone for the the corporate bailout. Klobuchar, she's done very little. Biden, he's doing very little as well. And these people, they won't do a lot because they don't have to. Realistically, they don't have to, because they know they're going to win anyways. So that's what you have to primary them. That's why shouts out to people like Shade Buttar, who's challenging Pelosi. I don't think he's going to win this time round, but this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. You have to find a candidate who you like, who's gonna fight for your causes, gonna fight for your corner, and back him. Help them, if you have to do door knocking. Obviously, there's a pandemic going on, so probably best not to do that. If leafleting's a thing you want to do that. Phone banking's a thing you want to do that, go for it. Donations, financial donations, if you can afford it, do that. Help these people primarying these senators, these members of the House, the presidential candidates that aren't doing what you need them to do to reform the system. Help them to help you. That's what has to be done. And so look, I'm going to leave the video there. It's gone on long enough, but shouts out to these people here, because I know that these are probably their private business. Well, this could be her private business. I doubt this isn't their private business, but they're trying to protect what they have, and massive respect to them, because I couldn't do what they did. Honestly, it takes a brave person to try and protect your livelihood, and also it takes a braver person to fight for something that you have no stake in, but you want these protests to be about protesting, not about looting or rioting and things like that. Shouts out to them, and look, I'm going to leave it there. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Shouts out to all the peaceful protesters in America. Keep going, and I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.